After an accident, there are common mistakes that people make, and most of the time it happens right away at the scene. The biggest mistake I see people make at the scene is not documenting the scene. Unfortunately, police officers don't take pictures. So it's best to take pictures of where your vehicle is located before you move it, if you have a chance. You first got to get to safety, but if you're able to get out and take a picture of where the vehicles were located, especially if you're talking about an intersection accident and who may have had the light or who may have had moved into whose lane, you want to document that right away. And I see people not do that. Probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they assume that the officers are going to collect every person that was at the scene. And simply that's not true. Many times we have clients that come to us and say, there was an older person, he looked like this, he was at the scene, but the officer didn't take down the information and I didn't take down the information. Nowadays it's so easy. Everyone has cell phones. Take pictures of what happened in the accident, take pictures of your vehicles, but ask the other person to share their contact information, or if they have a business card, get a business card and take a picture of the business card. So in case you misplace it, you put it somewhere else in your car, you have that in your phone. But you want to document that, especially witnesses, because witness information does not get captured very often by the police, especially if they think the accident was someone's fault and they're already determined that the officer's just going to do their job and get on to the next accident or next job. So do your due diligence at a scene and do everything you can to document it. One example I'll tell about an accident that I had when I was a defense attorney, where they didn't document it, and I was amazed. The woman was airlifted from the scene. It looked like she wasn't going to live. She did live. She was in a coma for 6 months. But there was no documentation at the scene by anyone. Now, of course, she couldn't have documented it, but what was amazing is it goes to show how officers just don't document what's at the scene. And that should have been documented by the officers, because that could have been what's called a traffic homicide investigation. When your traffic homicide investigation happens, when you see a road shut down, that means someone's died. They will actually shut down the road, take pictures, they will take measurements and all that. But a regular accident, they will not do any of that. So that's important to do. And that's a good example of what they don't do when you think they would have. The other mistake a lot of people make is not seeking medical attention. And the problem with not seeking medical attention, in Florida, you have 14 days. So in 2013, the PIP laws changed, which is the no-fault law, that if you don't seek treatment in 14 days, you don't get PIP. The problem with that is even if you don't use your PIP, you don't go in the 14 days, you go on day 15, the insurance company on the other side gets the benefit of what you should have used. So if you should have used $10,000 of treatment, they basically won't start paying you until after that $10,000 of treatment should have been used. So that's a problem with not seeking medical attention. A lot of times people think, I'm fine, everything's going to get better, I'm just going to hold out, I'm going to wait, and then they wait a week or two, and then they ask for a doctor appointment. The doctors can't just get you in that day a lot of times. So then you go past that time period. The other thing is insurance companies tend not to believe if you don't treat that you're injured. They think, well, if you don't go seek treatment right away, how could you have been injured? A lot of us, me included, I believe, would have an accident if I felt okay, if I wasn't bleeding out, I wouldn't go to the hospital. We get insurance companies complain all the time, our clients didn't go to the hospital. I don't think that's a problem. And I'm happy to defend that anytime at trial, and we do all the time, because I don't think jurors want people running to the hospital when there's any accident. But call your primary care physician the next day. Call someone else. Go to an urgent care facility later that day. That's what you want to do after an accident, is make sure not only do you have your injuries and you know of them personally, but you've documented them. Because unfortunately, if you don't document them, the insurance company doesn't believe you, and sometimes the jurors don't believe you if you have not documented your injuries. Another thing, I tell every client, there's 3 things that the insurance companies are going to use when they defend a case. One is if the property damage is not enough to cause an injury, they're going to say, in their opinion, they're going to say, hey, that vehicle only has a dent, that really didn't cause an injury. That's going to be one of their defenses. The other defense is pre-existing injuries. They're going to say everything's pre-existing, whether the person's 20 years old or 60 years old, they're going to say it's all pre-existing. That's what they do in every case. The third thing they say is, hey, there's been a gap in treatment. And I tell every client the day they walk in, the only thing you can control is the gap in treatment. Because if you decide I'm not going to treat for a month or 2 months because of various reasons, now we have to explain that away. When you go 2 or 3 months without treating, they say, well, gosh, how could you really be hurt if you didn't seek that treatment? So that's a very common mistake we see people make, and we try to keep on top of them. We have a system in place where we have case managers that reach out to our clients to check in with them and also check in on how their treatment's going. So we can talk about that in case they haven't treated, and we can explain that to the insurance company. One of the issues that comes up with clients is they think, well, I can't afford it, because sometimes they don't have health insurance that covers it, or their health insurance, well, they have a deductible or they have a copay when they go to the doctor. The thing is, most of the time, let's say you're going to physical therapy and you have a copay every time you go to physical therapy, we can work with your physical therapist and get them to agree to not charge you your copay as you walk out the door, and agree to what's called a letter of protection, which is an agreement that between you, ourselves, and the facility that at the end of the case, we will resolve that balance. So that saves you the financial burden of doing that. Same thing with other doctors. They will go into agreements, or they'll just agree to wait, not even with that letter of protection. They'll just agree to wait until the case is over. So don't ever let the financial issues cause you not to treat and cause a plaintiff not to treat, because they need the treatment. That's important. And unfortunately, the law assumes you're financially able to do whatever you can. So we can't stand up in front of a jury and say, oh gosh, we just didn't have enough money to do this, and we couldn't do this because of money, because that's not usually what a judge is going to allow. One thing at the scene that people do sometimes also make a mistake on is talking about who's at fault. And a lot of times you don't know who's at fault, and you might find a witness that tells you, no, you actually had the light, you weren't sure who had the light. So it's good not to say, I agree, I did something wrong, when that might not have occurred. So talk to the other person, but don't admit fault in the accident unless you know 100% I ran into someone, it definitely was my fault, because there's things that you may learn at the scene while you're there that prove that you are not at fault. Some other things, problems I see, and I'll use an example, is people trying to handle their case on their own. We had someone come in one time, very nice gentleman. He had handled this case on his own for a couple years and then couldn't get it resolved. And he came to us and said, can you help me get it resolved? We took the case, got all the medical records together. But what we found was he had paid, to his credit, he had paid all of his balances himself. He had put them on credit cards. He had done all kinds of things to pay his balances. That's great for the doctors, and it's great for the facilities that he went to. The problem was most of those bills weren't due. The facilities had given him the wrong amounts. He had overpaid very many times on several of these bills, and we could have reduced some of these bills to a more reasonable amount. Luckily, at the end, we did go back to a couple of facilities and said, you overcharged, this is illegal, this is improper, and they did the right thing and gave us back a reimbursement, which we just turned over to him. But that's sometimes a problem when people decide, I'm going to go out on my own, I'm going to do it on my own, I'm going to handle it. They don't know what they don't know, which is the problem is they don't know that medical bills can be reduced. They don't know. Sometimes medical facilities will bill you. You'll get health insurance, for example. You'll go to the hospital and you'll see a bill that says $2,000 for this. And then when you get the bill, you're like, wait, they only paid $100 and my copay is only $100. Where did the other $1,800 go? That is what's called an adjustment. But sometimes the facility will send you a bill for $1,800, which you may not have to pay. We know all of that. We have experience ourselves handling it. We have experienced staff that handle it. We look at line item on every bill before we settle a case to say, have they made the right adjustments? Have they done the right thing? Because every dollar we can save that we pay a facility or we pay a doctor is a dollar in your pocket. Now, we don't make more money off of that, but that's not what's important. What's important is we're giving you more benefit and getting more money to you. I wish, when we're talking about cases, I wish we could eliminate social media. That's a problem and a mistake people make. Luckily, we haven't had a huge problem in any of our cases, but your social media is considered public, even though you may even have it set on private. When we get in litigation, the judges allow, and the case law allows them to look at your Facebook account, for example, for the last couple of years. A lot of people don't want their Facebook account looked at for the last couple of years, nor do we really want to sort through 1,200 posts, or does the judge want to sort through 1,200 posts, some of them about your kids, some of them about what you ate for dinner last night, various things like that. But all of that becomes public knowledge. And that's a problem when people post about their injuries, about what they're doing. Fortunately, we've never had this happen, but when we were defense attorneys, Facebook was really just getting going, and we found a treasure trove of information as defense attorneys of people posting on Facebook and saying, I can't run, I can't do this, and there they are, with their medal at their 5K. So we always tell clients, be careful what you put on social media. It's important to put, even when you're just putting political things on social media that you may think may not come up, well, when you're in litigation, they may. So we think it's best to limit what you post on social media while you're involved in any case. We as attorneys can't tell you to delete anything, because that's what's called spoliation of evidence. So it's basically spoiling of evidence, because in theory, what's on your social media could be evidence. But people should, just in general in their life, go back and clean out their social media accounts occasionally, because it just accumulates on top of one another. Insurance companies may look at your social media right after a crash, or especially the more serious crash, they may go and look at it. They're going to Google your name, they're going to put it in, depending on how it comes up on social media, they'll find that information. Then if it turns out you have deleted it, especially if you have an attorney involved, and they told you to delete it, that could be a problem. So you do have to be careful about doing that, unless you've had a system in place that you can say every couple months, I've deleted my social media, and you could show that type of pattern. One of the other mistakes I see people make in cases is they don't get the police involved. They think, I need to get to work, I need to get to my kid's game, whatever it may be. They have reasons, or this isn't maybe a big enough accident, we just have a couple $1,000s of damage each, and let's just exchange information. The problem with that is not everything's documented. So sometimes you exchange information and you don't get it, or you get, unfortunately, we've seen people get false information. They get information, they get a phone number, they get an address, and it turns out it's not the person. The best thing to do if you absolutely cannot get the police involved is get a picture of their license, get a picture of their insurance card, so you at least have that information. But the better option is call the police, get them involved, because they're going to document it. Why is it important? Though the accident report's never coming into a trial, the insurance companies use the accident report to determine who's at fault. And they look at that, especially after an accident when you're deciding who's going to pay for the property damage. Because your case for your injuries may drag on for weeks, months, or years, depending on litigation and how long you treat. The property damage, you want that vehicle fixed as soon as possible. That may be a week or two after the accident, you want that vehicle fixed. But if we don't have an accident report, a crash report that shows who was at fault, the insurance companies may be fighting back and forth. And who's sitting in the middle? You waiting for your vehicle to get fixed. So it's always best to get the officers involved. A lot of times it can be done very quickly. Call the officer in each case. Don't make the mistake of just saying, we'll exchange information, we'll go on our way. Again, if you decide you can't get the officer involved, and that has happened to our clients before, they have to get to somewhere, they're in a big rush, or sometimes there's multiple accidents and they say it's going to be 3 hours, and they frankly just don't want to wait 3 hours. Not only document and get the information like the license, like their insurance card, but the best thing you can do, and I just had a client do this recently, which was great. They actually took out their phone, and they had watched or talked to me before, watched one of our videos before, and said, take out your phone, ask them to admit that they're at fault on video. I know that sounds odd, but it's a great way, because when they tell the insurance company, no, it didn't happen that way, you can just email or have us email the video and say, this is what happened, this is what they admitted at the scene. It's a 30-second deal. Most people, if they will admit they're at fault, they'll take care of it and they'll do it right at the scene. For us, a great client is someone that has documented evidence of the scene. They've gotten all the witness information that they can. They've called the police. They've taken photographs. If necessary, they've taken video at the scene. And they've gone and sought medical attention, whether it's through the hospital, through urgent care, or through their primary care physician. Then really the next best step beyond that is then they've called us. And they've called us shortly after the crash. That's important to call an attorney, call us at Beers and Gordon right after the crash, because we can start to analyze the case for you as the client and this good client and say, give us all this information. If we need to, we can actually go back out to the scene and document more things, at least about the road and various things. That's helpful because sometimes, especially in Florida, if there's skid marks or something like that, those can go away within a couple days during the rainy season. So sometimes we want to be able to document a scene very quickly after the accident. In fact, David had a case when we first got together where there was an issue where the person couldn't see because of hedges. And by the time the case got to him, which was very shortly after the accident, the landscape company came back and chopped the hedges down so you could see them. So now it looked like it was always good. And unfortunately, it was a wrongful death case, and it was a very big issue in the case. And luckily, we were able to find other documentation of it. But it's very important. So a great client's going to call us after the crash, after they've documented everything at the scene, and then we can talk to them about medical treatment, what they may need to do, because that's the other thing. They're going to have a lot of questions about, do I need to see an orthopedic doctor? Should I see a physical therapist? Should I see a chiropractor? Recently we've had several people that needed to see a neurologist because they have headaches or they have some mild traumatic brain injury, and we want to get them started on that treatment right away. Because if you don't start treatment right away, the problem is, especially physical, you can have scar tissue form and various problems that if they had started treatment right away, that would have been helpful. Not only for their health, but from our side, it's also helpful because it shows you did have the injury, we've documented the injury, now we can move forward and show the insurance company, this is what happened in the crash, this is what the treatment was, this is what the injuries were. So anytime you've had a motor vehicle crash, call us at Beers and Gordon. The consultation is always free. And probably the most important thing, and that you don't get at a lot of firms, you're going to meet with David or myself about the accident. And that's vitally important. And why that's vitally important is because we can answer your questions. An investigator can't answer any legal questions for you. They can't tell you anything about where to go or what to do. We can, and we can start analyzing that case right away. You're going to have a lot of questions. You need those questions answered. We're going to give you that free consultation. I can tell you, I don't think I've ever had a consultation last less than 45 minutes to an hour, because a lot of people have a lot of questions. And we're going to sit there and we're going to sit down and we're going to take the time. So after an accident, call us, Beers and Gordon.